Hello again and welcome to Last House in the Woods. So let's do it. Let's get strange with some more r/confessions. When I was 17, I did a hit and run and fled the scene. So back when I was 17, I had my learners, and my girlfriend at the time asked me to go pick her something up from the store. It was later at night, around 10 p.m., and I headed out. I hadn't been to this place often, so my bearings were off as to whether it was on the left or the right side of the road. Now the road is 2 lanes, both directions. I was on the inside, left lane. I was looking for the store when I noticed it at the last second. I swerved my car over at the last minute to get into the right lane and make the turn into the store, when suddenly the front end of my car slammed into a darker colored car in the right lane. I never noticed them. I wasn't paying attention. I put on my 4-ways and pulled behind them. Just then, he entered into a parking lot, probably to exchange information. I'll never know. Now, the parking lot is set up so the entrance and the exit are not the same, so you'd have to drive around the lot in order to exit. As soon as he pulled into the lot, a voice in my head said, "Just go." I slammed on the gas while he was still pulling in and floored it down the street. I got to a residential area and went even further into it before shutting my car off and the lights and sat there in silence. I thought to myself, what have I done? I had just turned a fender bender into a hit and run, and I just fled the scene. I tried to figure out what to do. Do I go back or do I leave? Being an idiotic 17-year-old, I fled completely. I knew I was screwed if I went back, and I'd probably lose my license, and if I didn't, insurance would be so high I may as well have lost it. I went home and switched the story around and told my parents how I was the one who was hit and the other driver did a hit and run and fled the scene. My girlfriend's dad had a friend who was a mechanic. He buffed off the other paint and fixed my bumper with zip ties. He offered to get me the parts cheap, but I was paranoid that they'd be able to trace the parts back to me, so I declined. I never filed an accident report, but told my parents I did. Shortly after this, I got rid of the car and bought another used car from my mom's friend. I wanted it to never be traced back to me. I took it to a junkyard myself to make sure it would be destroyed. No one ever found out what I did. I've never said anything to anyone. This happened 15 years ago, and I still feel immense guilt from it. I can imagine how much of a pain insurance must have been for that person. But I was a terrified novice driver. Whoever's car I hit in October of 2007, sorry I fled the scene. I hope it wasn't too much of a headache for you to deal with everything. When I was a teen, I caused a car wreck because I wanted to get stoned. As this occurred when I was 14, almost 50 years ago, I've not ever told a soul. I'm hoping this will at least be a cathartic release. Back in the early 70s, I was a stoner, and when combined with the fact that I was inherently cheap, I was always looking to get high on someone else's stash. One night, a friend and I were smoking weed on the side of the road tucked in the bushes of a neighbor's home, as was usually the case. I had no weed of my own, so my friend suggested a way for me to earn a joint from him. He suggested that I take the elephant turd markers that kept people from parking in the grass and stack them in the road so that the next car that came along would hit them. Having no shame or sense, apparently, at the age of 14, and simply wanting to get high, I did as he suggested. And it wasn't long until a car came and smacked into the aforementioned roadblock. He thought it was beyond funny. I was mortified, but not enough to go see the extent of the damage that I caused or to fess up to the stupid, dangerous stunt. So, to whomever that driver was, I'm deeply sorry for what I did. There was no good reason to have done it, and I wish I could undo it. Please forgive me. I am knowingly destroying my body and mind, and I can't stop. I have never been so unhealthy, but I never really was. I grew up very poor, and processed foods, as some of you may know, are much cheaper options, especially for a family of 6 being solely supported by one adult. I'm also autistic, so I have some pretty extreme sensitivities to texture and taste, and as a result, my diet is absolutely garbage. I smoked for almost 15 years, having started when I was 13. A few years back, I quit. I also stopped smoking pot and binge drinking, and for a moment, I was proud of myself. However, that marked the beginning of my physical decline. Just in the last year, I was found to have non-alcoholic related fatty liver disease and high cholesterol. Plus, I've been 15 pounds overweight for a couple years now. I also suspect I'm teetering on the edge of diabetes. On top of everything else, I'm extremely mentally ill. A cluster, a bunch of other pretty common diagnoses, and an unspecified eating disorder. And most days I can barely get out of bed and perform regular self-care, let alone any form of exercise. And I walk less than 5,000 steps a day. My sleep schedule is fucked due to an uncommon sleep disorder that makes it nearly impossible to hold a job or make any normal plans, and so I sleep the majority of the day, sometimes not sleeping until early afternoon. There's so many things that aren't even worth mentioning, but the end result is that it's all amounting to a slow and steady decline that will lead to my preventable but inevitable death. I plead with myself daily to change and to turn it around while I still can. But time after time, I just give up and fall into my bad habits, sometimes harder than before. I gave up every single vice that helped me cope with everything wrong with me and everything wrong with my life, but I can't stop this one. I don't have the discipline or self-control. If you told me several years ago that despite all the other horrible things I was doing to my body, that shitty processed foods would be my downfall, I'd laughed in your face as I smoked my 4th cigarette in a row. I routinely make doctor's appointments and then cancel them because A, driving makes me extremely anxious, and B, I already know what they'll say. They'll tell me that I'm killing myself in some sort of convoluted form of suicide, and that there's still time to turn it around if I just change everything. I feel like garbage every single day, and yet I resign myself to my fate. The funny part is that despite being a little chubby, I look pretty normal. So at a glance, you'd never even know that I'm destroying my body. It's only once you know me that you see my stupidity and realize that I'm a lost cause. I started and ended a fight club, and I was really mad about it. Some people may not think this story is true, just because it sounds kind of absurd and ridiculous, but I wouldn't go through all this just to not tell someone. Unfortunately, this has been weighing on me lately. I can't shake the idea that this feeling will always hang over my head. I really went through a lot over this spring, and I think if I don't tell this story, I won't ever properly come to terms with what happened. In early March of 2023, I was broken up with. It was my first somewhat sexually serious girlfriend, and the breakup was messy and long. It put more than just us under a lot of stress, and when things finally died down after a week or so of arguing and rumors, things appeared to be over. I started hanging out with 2 new friends of mine. We'll call one Aiden and one Drake. I had already known Aiden through a couple stoner friends of mine, and because he always ate breakfast with us, I had grown somewhat familiar, or at least used to him being around. He was a pretty quiet guy, pretty shy, but he did really well in class. Drake, on the other hand, was almost the opposite, one of the dumbest guys I ever met, and his handwriting was so bad, all of our English teachers just graded his work without reading any of the papers. Eventually, my interest in martial arts transferred to these 2 guys. We started shadow boxing and practicing behind a couple buildings during lunch. And so it started. At first, we were mostly interested in general fitness, trying to put on some muscle, as me and Aiden were both pretty small and skinny guys. Drake, again, though, was the opposite, and was a pretty big dude, due to him, 1, eating all the time, and 2, having wrestling experience. Eventually, another friend, let's call him Oscar, started joining us behind the gym, and now we had a fight club. Every day we would grab trays, walk smugly past school administrators, and into a 10x10 concrete pad, which served all right as an arena. We fought every day of the week. If there were healthy bodies and people willing to fight, we fought. We had one fight at a time, we never hit each other in the balls, and we never told anyone. That is until one day, Drake wanted to have a couple new guys over. He asked if he could bring a guy I knew better than he did. Of course, I didn't hesitate and brought him in and his friend. This is where things snowball a little, so I'll slow down. Jack's +1 brought some new attention, and some new people, some new fights. Soon, more than 10 people were grouped behind a gym, smoking weed and cigarettes and whatever else, fighting, until someone stopped moving or said uncle. It was ugly and dirty and painful, and every day I went home bruised. At the end of the week, I once fought 10 fights in 2 days and won each one. Every fight put an unbelievable stress on my body, something that was already frail. I was getting around 4 hours of sleep every night, stuck in a haze of rage. I was angry at a lot of people and things, but mostly myself. I had let something I cared about slip through my hands, and if I couldn't have it, I was going to destroy it myself. My eyes well up a bit writing this paragraph. On a Wednesday afternoon, one of the newer guys wanted to fight me, someone he'd never fought before. We had our match, made friendly, and didn't talk until the next day. That Thursday was just me, Drake, Aiden, and Oscar until the new friend showed up with someone close behind, like he was leading him there. I asked him what was up, and he said his friend wanted to challenge somebody. Not completely unheard of, it happened somewhat frequently. Unfortunately, it happened mostly to me. His spokesman tells me he wants to fight me, and begrudgingly, expecting another mediocre fight, I throw everything in my pockets off to the side and square up. When I tell you fighting is disgusting and dirty and violent, I'm not just saying it because I think I know better or I'm trying to virtue signal. From experience, I'll scream it at the top of any mountain. Fighting is the worst thing anyone can do with their time. Find a hobby like knitting, sculpture, writing, reading, anything other than fighting. It will save you time, money, and blood. So I got my ass beat, and bad. My face swelled and bruised and bled, and it took my mouth filling with blood for me to realize that Fight Club had to stop. I knew that this group needed this interaction, needed the socialization. I just didn't realize the awful toll it was taking on everyone. I didn't consider the gravity until I started seeing the actual impact and consequences of our actions. Days after I had finally ended it for good, not daring to set foot behind that godforsaken gym again, my ex had asked if I was in a fight club. I'll never forget how she looked at me then. I said no, and she left. Weeks after the last meeting, I started seeing social media posts glorifying fighting. If they weren't going to do it in an alley, they were going to do it in broad daylight. Fight Club existed for 3 months. In those 3 months, I think I've learned more. Looking back, I wish I had done literally anything else with my time. During those 3 months, I was angry, sleep-deprived, depressed, paranoid, and disassociative. I'm still trying to work through those emotions I never expressed in a healthy way. It probably sounds like alligator tears, but I truly have never been in a darker place. And I did a lot of things I wish I could take back. If you learn anything from me after this, you'll start to value your sleep and well-regulated emotions.